how we can measure conversion marketing and things like that. I'll drop in some slides. We'll have I'll share some information for sort of 10 or 15 minutes or so, and then we'll go into 10 or 15 minutes of discussion points, and we'll sort of have 3 main topics. So it's a similar approach to last week. Monday's session was really good. We had some really good sort of insights and comments and people bouncing off each other. So I'm sure we'll have some more of that today. But before we do get going, is there any questions? Okay, let me start to share my screen, and then we'll get going. To move that. Okay. So websites and content in the second week. Today, I've got one slide about the technical architecture of websites, just for completeness, just in case anyone's interested. It's not going to be the rest of the content is not going to be technical at all. We'll be talking about marketing content. But for those of you who are interested, most websites these days are built using what's called the 3-tiered architecture. That's a concept that's been baked in into websites, but more broadly, internet-driven software, meaning software that's accessible over the internet for quite a long time now. And the idea is that you split these 3 layers. You make 3 separate layers of coding, if you like, of the programming that sits behind these systems, and you do it in part so that you can theoretically make a change to any one of these layers without changing the other layers. So it makes the code, more efficient. But it's also that there's kind of material differences between these layers. So let's talk about the presentation layer at the top. So this is literally what you see on your browser screen, whether it's whatever browser it is, Google Chrome, Firefox, Internet Explorer, that the mobile browsers, they're all able to read HTML5 and JavaScript. And that's programming language that actually gets served up onto your browser, comes up through the internet when you press, when you go to any web page on any website in the internet, and you'll be served up this code, and that's what makes the website look pretty, or look exactly how it's supposed to look, hopefully. And then that presentation layer is served up by what's called an application layer. So the application layer doesn't run, it's not a program that runs on your computer, it runs on the web server, the website server, which can be anywhere in the world. And that's if you like, the intelligent stuff. So for those of us who have marketing websites, that aren't transactional websites, e-commerce or any sort of transactional website, we still have most or virtually all of us will have content management systems. So the application layer would be the content management system. And this is the thing that's pulling out the right bits of images and right bits of text and putting them in the right place before it serves it up through the internet as HTML5 code that's presented on our computer. And then right at the bottom, you have the database layer. So again, if it's a content management system, the database would literally be tables and columns that are holding all of the bits of content, images, videos, and text that make up all of the elements of your website. If you're running an e-commerce website or any other website that's pulling data from a database, you've got tables of data that sort of cross-reference each other. So that's the database layer, and that's why it's called the 3-tiered architecture. Okay, enough about the techie stuff. Let's talk about the structure of content on websites, but also marketing. So I want to do a quick straw poll here. So just visually put your hand up if you're familiar with this concept of hero, hub, or hygiene. Is anyone familiar with that? No, okay. And there's no reason why you should be. I just wanted to check. And it was the same on Monday. So hero, hub, and hygiene is a kind of way of talking about content, specifically for digital marketing content. And you can talk about this concept for any content, meaning content on social media, content on third-party websites, but you can also talk about content on your own website as Hero, Hub, and Hygiene. And just really, really broadly, the hero content typically, and I'll show some examples in a moment, but typically it's kind of it's typically high value content, normally high production value, but high time investment value, and it's designed to create broad awareness. So it loosely relates to the concept of the top of the funnel when we were talking about the awareness phase of our marketing funnel. Hero content works up there because it's supposed to kind of go viral if possible, or at least be widely be widely read, or be interesting to a wide group of people. And then hub content, this is our regular content that we create that's regularly interesting to our particular audience. ICMA, the audience for ICMA will have an interest in being updated in the latest news, in regulation changes for investment banks and things like that. So blog content is a really good example of hub type content. And when we talk about hygiene content in the context of a website, this is going to be the utility pages. So if we're an e-commerce website, then it's the product page, and it's the checkout page. If we're a B2B website, it's the service page that articulates the service that we're offering. The contact us page we can also refer to as hygiene content. So if we look at just use an example, so Hertz, the car hire company. So an example of hygiene content, so the bottom of the funnel type of content would be their booking page. So if you're going to hire a car, you enter your pickup location, your drop-off location, the dates and times, and you press search. And this page is it's a utility. It's there to perform a function. So when we're talking about hygiene content, it's going to convey some information, and then it's going to be quite clear what we want the user to do next. So if it's a service page for a B2B business, we want to present some information about the service, and then we want them to probably make an inquiry of some description. If it's an e-commerce website, we want them to press the checkout button or the add to basket button. So these are examples of hygiene content. So hub content, I already mentioned the best way to think about it, for now, and there are other examples, but it's blog. So it's a blog article. So if we think about a blog article as hub content, what is the purpose of a blog article in the context of marketing? It's probably in the main, it's because we're writing this content because we believe that it's interesting to either all of our potential customers, or more likely probably a specific group of customers that we've identified, or potential customers or customers who are interested in what we're doing, and we're creating that content as a hook to bring them in to capitalize on that awareness that we've probably already created, and to get them to engage with us, so to read our content. So in this example, Hertz is writing a blog article about green driving tips. So a subset of their particular audience will be interested in green driving. So they might have Hertz, might have some electric vehicles available for this type of audience, and they might be referencing that in this blog article. I think the key thing to remember for hub content is that if you're doing it well, that's great, and the content's got to be great, and it's got to be relevant to the right audience. But we also want to think about what type of hygiene content does it link to? Because if you're creating hub content, it's typically used as a hook to bring people in from other areas of the internet, and we want them to engage with that piece of content. But ideally, in an ideal world, we also want them to get down to our hygiene content, because that's where we can actually either create opportunities or even potentially sales. And so embedded within that hub content, we want links back to the relevant bits of hygiene content also. And for those of you who are engaged in SEO, or in charge of running SEO projects, then hub content's a great place for us to have those relevant key phrases embedded and hyperlinked, again, ideally to relevant hygiene pages. Okay, we'll discuss this and go into questions in a moment, but let's just cover, two more. So one is the hero content that we said at the top. So hero content, there are many different examples of of how you can do it. You can have high production videos. You could even have an annual event or an awards event or something like that. And the content, obviously the event itself is the hero content. And the way that you choose to express that on your website would be associated with that hero content. So in this example, we've seen that Hertz have put together a whole bunch of material. They've pulled down a whole bunch of resources that talk about American road trips. So they've listed out the best restaurants, they've listed out the best driving routes to travel, they've listed out the best points of interest, and they've essentially created an area of their site that's a mini sort of American driving trip planner for any potential tourist who might be interested in going to the US and exploring it, with a driving trip. And obviously that type of content is going to be interesting potentially to anyone in the world who might at some stage be looking to go and have a holiday like that. So that's an example of hero content. And there's one more sort of concept I want to talk about before we drop into some discussion just now, and that's landing pages. So the important thing to say about landing pages is that they, like a lot of terms in marketing, they kind of mean different things to different people, and none of those things are wrong. It's just about the way that you use the language. But in the context of this conversation, let's just imagine if we're running an advertising campaign, and that advertising campaign is targeting a specific audience on a specific channel with a specific message. We typically want to send that user not to the home page of the website, because we're taking them from a specific message and they've been targeted as a specific type of person. Therefore, in order to get the best out of that interaction that we've created via, in this case, advertising, we want to send them to a really relevant page that's optimized to take that potential customer, or potential audience person onto the next step that we want them to take. So in that scenario, we would want to create a specific landing page for that particular purpose. Just as an FYI, you can arguably call service pages landing pages and product pages landing pages, and you might be optimizing those pages for organic search so that people land on those pages from a relevant organic search rather than, again, to the home page. But that's a slightly different sort of landing page, if you know what I mean, and we'll talk more about that when we talk about SEO and indeed social advertising, when we dig into more detail on those concepts in the coming weeks. But just for completeness, because we're talking about content, let's talk about this. So this is called the anatomy of a perfect landing page. This graphic's been around for years, but it doesn't say, well, I'll just talk you through it. So the idea here is that there's sort of 9 things you want to do. So first of all, have a nice looking headline, but probably more importantly, a headline that is relevant to wherever they've come from. We want a secondary headline that builds on the offer, that we're typically offering something with a landing page, and obviously the text needs to reinforce that. Testimonials, any sort of third-party sort of proof of value, work well, it's classic kind of sales thing. And then probably the key thing is this number 5 and 6 here. So the text and the button, we can refer to it as the CTA, or this, you might have you probably would want a Google Analytics goal that tracks how many people click this button, because that's what we actually want them to do. We want them to engage with the content and then click on the button. And so that would be the CTA. And incidentally, you may or may not have noticed, but you'll see a disproportionately large number of call to action buttons will be orange in color. And the reason for that is theoretically, as far as I understand, psychologists say that orange is the color of action and kind of just do it. And that's the reason you'll see a lot of orange buttons on the internet. Was number 7. Yeah. So number 7, the links that we have, typically on a landing page, we don't really want people going on another link. We want them to click on the button. So if we do have links, they'll be limited and they wouldn't look like the main website full navigation sort of area. Number 8, obviously the main image, we want to reinforce the message. And then all number 9 is indicating is that's the fold line. So when designers design any web page, regardless of the size of the screen, if you write it well and if you write in HTML5 compliant way, then you can always know from a design perspective where the fold line will be. And so for a landing, that's important for any page actually, but particularly for landing page, because we want all of this key information above the fold line. We don't want anyone to have to scroll down for it, and certainly not for the call to action, most importantly. Okay. So look, like last time, these kickoff questions, they're meant to be starter questions. So if you've got a more relevant points or insights, or if you want to ask a question to me, please do that. Don't feel like you have to answer, this question, but do if you want. So I'll sort of go first. In my experience, there is a massive difference between different types of organizations, and it doesn't really matter if they are a well-organized organization or not. I've still seen massive variations in how content is managed inside organizations. And it's not to say that some are good or some are bad, but in some organizations, there is a serious amount of control that is employed over the creation and the production of content in a good way, actually. So they have teams of people, they have a content calendar, and they have teams of people that feed into the calendar, and teams of people that write the content, and they've got names on, names and dates against a piece of content, and it goes through some sort of QA process, and then it gets pushed up onto the blog site typically. And then on the other side, you kind of got, it's a bit of a kind of haphazard approach. They might do a lot of things really well, but content's a bit of an afterthought, and then obviously there's lots in between. So let's start with Mariona today. What do you want to say and or point out?
Well, so I think for us, the wider company creates a lot of hub content. I mean, that's basically a role in the industry, and some hero content about what's happening in the markets as well. The education part, which is the part of the website that Mark and I look at, it's mostly hygiene, because obviously we want people to go to those courses. We have started discussing about content that could potentially fall under the hub category, and whether or not we could potentially put it on the website. And I mean, the landing page, I was just looking at it while you were talking, and we've recently redone it, and we're all very happy with the way it looks. But I am wondering now, maybe we can tweak a couple of things to make it a bit more efficient. So yeah, that's.
Well, that's the idea. Knowledge is power.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mark, do you want to add anything to?
No, I think Mariana's absolutely right. I think that we mostly do hygiene content, and some of it is better than others. So we're looking at the moment at reviewing a certain part of our website, which is the registration process, which is very much a hygiene-based content type. And it's interesting because I think the hygiene creates sort of is the fundamental, and you have to get that right. And so we're really placing a lot of effort in making sure that the hygiene content that we do have in the form of the registration system and these type of things really make the experiences as pleasant as possible and as stress-free as possible. I think that's kind of our focus at the moment.
Yeah, but you guys you run email newsletters, don't you?
We do all sorts of stuff. So we do newsletters. We do we do a lot of hub content in terms of newsletters, videos, webinars, this type of stuff. We also do, I suppose, what we do, hero content. So recently we released an online course on sustainable finance, which is a really popular subject in the markets at the moment. And we spent some money on introductory video, promoting that particular course. And, we posted that everywhere that we could. And that would really be the hero content, I suppose. So we do, I think I recognize different elements of that structure of the pyramid. But I think Marion is right. Certainly when it comes to education, we're fundamentally creating hygiene content, some of which, we're working to improve. And I think we're looking more into how we can create more hub content for education, and then how to distribute that and all the relative stuff.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Listen, I apologies, my internet connection is a bit ropey at the moment, so I'm gonna turn my video off until I can shut a few things down. But can we come to Flavio next? Flavio.
Hi. Well, we don't have much. So Stefania helped me out here because we don't have much. We don't have a website. We don't have. Everything is centralized at the head office, where there is a team that, with the help of an agency, I believe, Stefania, isn't it? With the help of an.
Unfortunately, we cannot really contribute a lot in this. Because the website is one website, which is the same for all the ENIT delegations all over the world and in Italy. And there is a department that looks after that. So it's mainly an informative website. So the hygiene, there is no call to action, basically. It's just you go onto the website if you want to learn a bit more about Italy, a bit more about the regions, etc. As I said before, we don't sell directly. So it's just an informative website, which is not done in this country. We used to have a website, which wasn't very, if you have to have a website, you really have to work hard at it. And in the end, it wasn't really viable to have a local UK website when you can find all the information on the official website, which is italia.it. You can go and have a look if you wish. So I'm afraid we don't have that much to add.
No worries. Look, it's an interesting, as a general sort of subject that might be relevant for one or two here. When you're talking about international organizations that have lots of lots of representatives or offices in different countries speaking different languages, then it sort of raises particular issues around translation and localization and things like that. And it is quite normal for international companies to have a central website that has a central team, normally obviously in the home country, wherever that may be, and they will have a certain amount of central control. But I can tell you that the private sector organizations obviously need to be at the forefront of marketing. Some of them have developed quite sophisticated ways of having a centralized meaning, or regional and or global kind of content calendar. So here are the themes that we're going to cover this month, and a central team which will generate the initial sort of content, and then either via their content management system or through some other sort of semi-manual process, that content will be seeded out to local representatives to do the localization and obviously the translation and the seeding across the local social channels, if they've got that in place. And marketing is a lot of work. It is an investment, but as we're going to see going through this course, not just today, content on the website, hygiene content on the website is really important, because if someone gets to the website, you want them to actually do something. And I would suggest that even with ENIT, although it's not a direct response, you're going to convey some information about Italy. And although you're not going to have direct control of it, you hope that an increased number of people having visited that website would go off onto some other platform and book a holiday, basically, in the main.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't necessarily say that it's not relevant for you. It might be not within your control at the moment. Does that make sense?
Yes, I mean, probably things will change, because there is a freshly nominated Minister for Tourism, which is the very first Minister for Tourism in, I don't know how many years, maybe 40 years. And I think he's having a look at the website as well. So things might change soon.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, hopefully, yeah, in that terms, yeah.
Good, thank you.
And we use the homepage as a landing page normally when it's our homepage is the landing page. We use the italia.it. That's the one we use.
Yeah. Yeah, and look, our homepage is kind of like I said before, the concept of a landing page is quite generic, because in a way a homepage needs to be a landing page, because people who get to the homepage, they might fit in any one of your different audience groups. Mm-hmm. You know, if you've got a consumer offering and a B2B offering, for example, you want the homepage to take them off to the right place. So you're right, homepage is a landing page, Flavia. Yeah. Should we come to Hannah?
Sure. So we have really our hero content is managed more sort of globally or managed on a European level. And there's certain things that they will provide to us that we then roll out so that we've got a consistent message throughout all of the markets. And then the hub and hygiene is primarily up to the markets to define, because obviously from a European or a global perspective, it might not be relevant to those markets. So that's really more for us to define. And something that we've certainly already got on our website are blog posts and case studies. And they're a really key thing for us to sort of get the message out there for what the product is, and to show actually there are quite a lot of benefits of using the product. And here are some real life examples where we've worked with our customers to develop those. And that's certainly part of our sort of plan going forward, to be able to be focusing on that more. Just is a really nice way of sharing that experience. And I think quite often with any product, any kind of consumer product, hearing somebody else's experience on it is often all you need to then do it yourself. So yeah, we're really focused on that actually in the UK with our product.
Thanks for that, Hannah. That's a really good example you've just pulled out there, because particularly for you, where corporate carpooling is it's arguably an emerging technology. I mean, people know what it is, but it's emerging in terms of, you know, going forward, it's very likely that, you know, the masses will be moving towards it. And as we sort of journey towards that place, you know, yourselves and the competitors will want to be owning the space for becoming, the term is like a recognized authority on the subject. And that, you know, that is a great way of creating, well, initially awareness, but also engagement with, you know, with what you're saying. So that, thanks for that example. It's a brilliant one for that, in that sense. Shall we come to Rosie? Let's come to you, Rosie.
Yeah, so we have a mixture of content. So Danny oversees our content. He attends editorial meetings every Monday. So our content is kind of dictated either by campaign or what's the other one? Or just whatever comes up in editorial. So if we're on campaign for, say, MA, we always try to have content around that's related to that, whether that's students that have graduated from them courses, reasons why to study that course, but we always have a mix. So then intertwined with that, we have like masterclass blogs, those sort of blogs that sell the course as well. And then we also like to tie in key calendar events. So whether that's Halloween or Valentine's Day, as to key films to watch, we try and piggyback off different trends.
Thanks, Rosie. I have to say, on Monday, Danny, your colleague Danny, definitely got like star pupil of the week, because it is true. Met Film are pretty. They are an example of sort of one of the organisations that I think are doing it really well. That the fact that you have an editorial meeting on a weekly basis, and that, you know, that kicks off little workflows. I know that a lot of the other delegates on Monday started drawing down on Danny's information. So please continue to share as we go through. Are you involved in those as well, Rosie?
No, I'm not. So I don't really get involved in content. I think because he oversees social media, it's kind of better for him to have an overview, because he then, well, we decide as a team what goes on social media, what goes on the blog, the website, but we always try and tie them back in together. So if they're on our Instagram, we always try to get them over to our website. if they're reading a blog, there's always a CTA for them to either apply now or request a prospectus. So we always try and get those details and information.
Yeah, and thank you actually. So Rosie's just made another point that I should have made when I was talking before. So if you're writing a blog article, having a CTA on there, is a really good idea. At the very least, it's sign up for join our newsletter if you're not really on it. But moreover, it would probably be, join our webinar, join our seminar, make an inquiry. One CTA, and yes, Danny and his team were very clear. When they plan a blog article, it's all of the things you mentioned and specific CTA. Okay, Alice or Brian, which one should we come to first? Let's go to Alice first.
Okay, so our website is not really fit for purpose. And so we don't want to use the homepage or any program pages as landing page, but it's a moving beast. We are working on it. So we have for time being implemented landing pages, for example, and using these landing pages to the campaign. So if it's sign up for webinars or sign up for virtual open week, it would land on that particular landing page. Or like a generic brand awareness campaign would land on a generic campaign, again with sign up for something, and basically to generate leads as well. And what we also do with the landing page is, because we advertise in the US, so it would be also, the spelling would be Americanized, for example, or we would change imagery in a way suitable to the audience. And in terms of content creation, we do a lot of blogs at the moment. It's really something this generation Z, or the new students who started back in September and in spring, they're quite helpful in helping us, giving us content from a student perspective. So that's working well for time being, but and it's being published on the website, but this is it for time being. So it's still some work to do on how to improve that.
It's good though. It sounds like there's a lot of good stuff going on there. Brian. Yeah. Hello, Brian. Hi, Brian. You got anything to build on that? Yeah,
I don't have anything to add beyond what Alice has shared with you. And my apologies, I had to duck out twice because I've restarted twice. I keep freezing, so I'm a bit lost. I've been capturing bits and pieces of this, but I'll leave it with what Alice has stated.
All right. Thanks,
apologies.
Brian. No worries. Look, one of the points Alice was making there, sort of playing with the imagery, playing with the text and the call to actions. That is a part of optimizing the performance, particularly if we're running, a lot of ad campaigns, and the universities, it's really, really important for Richmond in this case, but all the universities. So thank you very much, everyone. Right, I'll drop into a bit more content then. Let me share screen. Okay. So again, just a really quick straw poll. I've got you up. Just put your hands up if you've managed a website redesign project or website project of any kind. No one. Okay. Hands up if you think you will do at some stage in the future. All right. So there's a couple of people there, and for the others, hopefully this is still interesting. So I'm going to talk now about the website planning and design process, and I'm going to focus on the components that, from a marketing perspective, even if we're not directly in control, we would want to have an interest in. So first of all, it doesn't really matter whether you're a massive company or a medium-sized company or a smaller company, but if you're going to write a brief, if you're going to write a tender or write a brief for an internal team or an external team, then these are the 4 questions that we want to start with, and the brief might be way longer than this, but these are the really, really important things. So it's who do we want to say it to, and there might be groups of people there, obviously, And how do we want them to perceive us? Because there is obviously a design element to all of this stuff, and perceive us is, it's one question, but there's a lot underneath that. It's all about our brand values and, and how we connect with people and all that kind of stuff. But then the other really important thing is, what do we want them to actually do as a result of visiting? And just on a really simplistic level, if it's a B2B website, you're probably looking for people to obviously research your product, but the ultimate action, like the ultimate conversion action, would likely to be make inquiries. Enits, although they don't have an ultimate conversion action, that the purpose of their website is to directly and or indirectly increase the number of people, or maximize at least the number of people who would take holiday in Italy. And they've obviously got some other things they're doing with businesses and things like that. But what's the primary action of a website? Be clear in your own mind about what the primary action is. And clearly there's going to be a whole bunch of secondary objectives as well, and tertiary objectives. And there might be more than one primary action, and that's okay. But let's be clear about what they are. And then I'll talk about the phases of a website builds, but the planning phase and the design phase, these are the two phases where really, as marketers, we want to be, via our brief, we hope that we're going to find the right partner who we can walk down the road to create the right, website platform for us. But we definitely, probably, in my view, we definitely want to be involved with the design phase and the planning phase. So I'll talk you through, these two elements. So we've spoken really about the concept of a web design brief, certainly in terms of its marketing, communication, technology aside. These are the things we want to be really clear on. Who are we speaking to? What are we saying to them? And what do we want them to do as a result of that interaction? And then that would lead into this design phase that, would be led by a designer, but we as marketers still want to have an input into these things. So I'll build on sitemap wireframes now. So a sitemap, I'm sure kind of everyone's seen these. From a design perspective and from a user experience perspective, the sitemaps are important, and it's important we typically in a website design project, we start off with a logical grouping of all of the pages, of the pages that we imagine are going to need to be, in our website. And if we're talking about a redesign, then you start with what you've got and then you rationalize it. And the reason why it's important from a marketing perspective is it's not just the content that's in a website, it's the flow of the content that's in a website. So Flavio sort of made the point that a homepage can be, can also be, a homepage can be a landing page. If you've got materially different audiences, you want to send them down different user journeys, and a sitemap is going to help you to articulate the flow of information relative to the different sorts of audience groups that we've got. And then there's something called wireframes, which some of you might have heard of this. This is, broadly speaking, this is just, without the design, what's the layout of the most important pages that are in your website. And again, the reason why this is important is that every page in a website has a purpose, and each page in a website is helping the user, depending on what group they're in, and depending on what the related primary action is, we want to take the user on a journey. So it's the homepage of Richmond from an American student who's interested in working in London. Now, what's the next step for that student? Is it to research about London, or is it to research about the university? Well, it could be either, but both of those pages, once they've conveyed their information, what's the next step from them for that person thereafter? Well, it could be that they go and, if they've researched about the university and the courses, they could go and research about London, or vice versa. But ultimately, there's an ultimate action, which is, probably apply now, or at least download a brochure, or some other sort of primary or secondary goal. And so if we've got our sitemap correct, we now want to make sure that the key pages are laid out correctly to assist that journey correctly. And there are all sorts of tactics. I mean, I'm not a designer myself, but designers will use tactics to create a page that will sort of maximize the the conversion, meaning the number of times a user will take the step that we want them to take given the page that they're on. And just to sort of throw a few things out, there's users don't typically, well, you'll know for yourself, it's unlikely you read an entire website, you more scan websites. And when we scan, we tend to scan in a Z formation. So I'm going to have to do it the other way around so it looks right for you. So you would start top left, which is probably up here for you, and you kind of scan across, and then you scan across, you scan across. So the way that you lay out a page typically would sort of be reflective of that classical motion of human beings' eyes. And and then obvious things like the order in which you place your services is going to be related to the order of popularity, or depending on what we strategically want to push. And then the other thing that we mentioned earlier is the fold line. So we want to design the page so we know that the key information is above the fold, and it's really supplementary information that's below the fold line. And so as marketers, we want to be involved in this part of the process because we want to know that our designers are thinking about how our audiences are going to sort of use this site, as opposed to just putting down on a page what they think looks nice. But obviously we do want to see what it looks like. So once the wireframes are signed off, then we want the designers to put the creative on top of those wireframes and then ideally present them back to us as marketers. If we're owning those projects as marketers, we want to sign off this phase of the project. So the whole process, typically it would look something like this. So that the planning phase of the project is what we just sort of spoke through there. So it starts with our briefing document. We've got the website architecture, which would be those sitemaps, wireframes, and then the page designs come through. And then we want to sign that phase off, because if we sign that phase off, then when the project does go into build, it's the build phase where that presentation layer is built, the application layer, the data layer, if that's relevant. When all of that programming happens, we will optimize, we will have a more efficient project if we're not making design changes when we're in the build phase of the project. Because if you have to make design changes as a programmer, it sort of doubles, triples, or even quadruples the time. So important that we have this distinction between phases. And then once a project comes out of build, typically it would go into some sort of QA and sort of design QA phase. And at that stage, if we as marketers can get insight on the website, will be sitting on some sort of test server or staging server somewhere, then we can start to finalize the actual content and the copy that we've been talking about so far. And once once we've got our core bits of hygiene content and a few bits of hub content up there, we don't need all of our we don't need to fill it out with hub content. Hub content, remember, it's supposed to be episodic. It's supposed to turn up once a week or once a fortnight or once a month. So we don't need to go live with all of our hub content, but we certainly want the key elements of hygiene content in there, and then we kind of go live. Okay, so the question here is, have you been through a website design or development project? And if you have, what have been the challenges? But I'm not sure anyone has.
Well, to be honest here, Elliot, we just went through a redesign of the education website. And
I beg your pardon, yeah.
It was interesting. I mean, I think our issue was that we were only redesigning a section of it. We weren't redesigning the entire website. And so to ensure we were consistent stylistically, that wasn't really an issue. So, our designers understood where to draw influence from, and we could use common image banks and common sort of design style guides and this type of stuff. Where we had, I think, more problem was the fact that we knew that we needed to incorporate a lot of content, and it was trying to figure out how most efficiently to create the wireframes and so on and so forth, to maximize the kind of appeal of the site. And what we ended up doing, we actually ended up adding a layer. So when we first had our website, we'd have a home page for education, and then we'd have a series of separate course pages, for example. What we ended up doing was adding a layer. So we categorize our courses into subject areas. And so what we did, we added cluster pages. And I think this was actually on the advice of Mintwist that we did this. And it worked out very, very well, because what it essentially did, in the first instance, it allowed people who were clicking on something, an ad they would see on a social media platform for one of our courses. It wouldn't always simply go to a course page. It would go to a cluster page which contained different courses around the same subject area. So it kind of, if you're interested in this, how about these type of things? So that was very, very good. That was an interesting sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, when I look back at it, when I have a look at the information you've just shared, things like the fold line, whether we did that as well as we could have, there are definitely things to improve on. So yeah, I think it's not a process that I'd want to have to go to too often, but it was really it was an interesting thing to do.
Thanks for that, Mark. There's some really good points there, and actually, the cluster page thing is a really interesting point you've brought up, and relevant, and an emerging best practice way of collecting a whole series of courses that are related in a subject sense, because you don't necessarily want to create hundreds of different landing pages. So cluster pages is definitely a way of doing that. And I guess traditional universities will talk about, the School of Medicine and the School of, Science and things like that. I'll come to Brian in a minute to talk about how Richmond do it. But Mariona, is there anything?
No, I actually really enjoyed that process. It's tricky. The back and forth can be tricky sometimes, but I actually really enjoyed that process. It was like a mini version of all the stages you just said, because like Mark said, the rest of the website was actually relaunched in the summer last year. And I think they went through all of these stages in much more detail, but we were not as involved. We were just sort of looking at the temporary design of the education pages until we actually could get into it properly. So yeah, that was it. It was the landing page, it was the wireframes. On the actual course pages, we can probably do something like that. But the things that I was talking about that probably we could tweak, one of them was actually the line that you just mentioned. So yeah.
The cluster pages.
No, sorry, on the landing page where the line calls it, where
the fold line.
Screen. Yeah, the fold line. Mark just mentioned, potentially we could have done that better, and I mean, maybe we still can.
Yeah, it's I think this is a really interesting thing, this idea of a fold line, because what it really enforces you to do is think about what is truly important, what information is truly important, and prioritize that information, right? So people don't have to scroll down. And I think that's a really, really useful process to go through for any organization. You have to think about the core of what people are attracted to. And I think Marianne is right. I think we can potentially improve on that a little bit in some of the pages, but it's an ongoing process.
Yeah, and there are design techniques and front-end techniques that you could do to do things. Let me give you an example. I was speaking to a B2B company just the other day who's going to sort of come on board. They're not part of this process. They're not on this course, but they had two primary objectives. One was download an ebook. The other one was sign up for a monthly event, information sharing, but essentially a sales event. And they had two equivalent landing pages for this on this course, and they had lots of links to these pages from the home page and all of their service pages, which was great. But the only problem was that it was a whole bunch of text, and the sign up button was literally, you're watching my fingers disappear. It was below the fold in both cases. And actually, all they really needed to do was, it's a relatively basic website. So it's either put the sign up button at the top and at the bottom, so that if someone reads right down to the bottom, still it's available, or you can there are front-end techniques using something called Ajax and things like that, where you can get a follow button to a sign up button, rather, or any button to follow the user up and down the screen. So it will always be available for them. And just things like that. I mean, they're not going to, it's marginal differences. And we'll talk about that in the last phase, and adding up over time that make a difference.
Yeah, actually on the actual course pages, we had a very similar thing where the registration button was not that obvious to find or that immediately clear. And I think it came up on one of our first meetings with you, and it was one of the first things we changed. So now we have it at the very top of each course page.
Yeah, good. It definitely works. Brian, let's come to you.
Yeah, I haven't been involved in much of a large scale project with the website. And given that we have limited resources, I think we do fairly well in some departments. Specifically signing up for events, online inquiry forms, downloading brochures, things of that nature that are right in the front for our customers, for our end users. Where we get lost and things start to fall apart, I think, is the overall navigation. And this is a result of Band-Aids being placed on top of Band-Aids on top of Band-Aids. And sometimes I will look for a page that I cannot find, that I know I have found someplace before, but I don't know how to get to it. Or I'll have a student, I've even had a student before forward a page to me, and I was like, I've never seen this page before. So I think the peripheral stuff gets buried in the back. I think up in the front with the online sign up, the webinars, brochures, things like that, I think we do a good job. It's the other stuff that really falls apart. And that's a result of, like I said, just years of Band-Aids on top of Band-Aids and never really being able to step back and take a look at the big picture and restructure the navigation. And that's, it's resources for us.
I was going to say, Brian, if it's any consolation, we have a real issue, not necessarily education, but the rest of the association has the same thing. We have pages upon pages upon pages, and people are constantly asking where things are. So you're not alone.
I've stumbled across pages that have logos from like 3 logos ago, which if I do the timeline, it could be 8 or 9 years old, and we don't even know where they are. So,
yeah, it's sort of, it is funny. Actually, this came up on Monday as well, this exact thing. It is funny, but in a sense, it's also quite, it is in all seriousness, it is a bit of an issue. So the thing is about a large organization like ACME, Richmond University, a lot of the UK universities have this issue, and we've Mintzis have a few university clients, and that the benefit of having a huge number of pages is the footprint, the physical footprint from an SEO perspective is massive. So it's like a big chunk in the internet. But the downside, so we had a university client who had about 40,000 pages, of which only about 10,000 were really being used in any material basis. So when we ran some automated analysis across all of this stuff, we realized that there was massive, what's called cannibalization. We're going to talk about SEO next week, but it's where you've got a page that's not really used, it's not really seen, but it's drawing down, because when the Googlebot goes and indexes all the pages in a website, it will say, what's the page about, mathematics course or whatever. And if it's finding too many references, it splits the Google juice across them. So there's a material benefit at some stage. Normally it's when you redesign or redevelop a website, but it can be a standalone process where you identify these pages and literally mark them for deletion, or not just mark them for deletion. You take what SEO value they do have, you point it back to the page where you actually want the main page, the up-to-date page, and then you delete it. And so it can be an issue. What you're talking about, Brian, it's sort of almost funny, but it can be a problem, certainly if it's allowed to carry on for many years.
Sorry, Jennifer, Elliot just asked, who would these type of projects for websites that are really cumbersome and have a lot of excess sort of stuff and need to be scaled down? I mean, is that a design agency or a marketing agency such as yourself that does that sort of work, or do you actually go through more specific technical agencies who does that sort of stuff?
There would probably be different agencies. Look, the Mint Twist SEO team run projects like that. The one I just mentioned is the biggest version of that project we've run. But frankly, any SEO project we do, even if it's just a site with 1,000 pages, we would still run that process as part of the SEO project. If you've got 40,000 pages, you need to automate elements of it, obviously, otherwise it can get insane. But you absolutely can automate large chunks of that process using tools that SEO companies would have, like us and others. So I would say that the project I've just described is really an SEO project. But like I say, if you're going to redesign and develop a website, you can put it into a project like that as well. Alice, got anything to add for Richmond?
No, not really. Brian just made me laugh because it was so true, you know, it's so true. And I'm laughing today, but on a daily operational basis, I sometimes wonder what we are doing really, because we need to fix these things. We need to sit back and fix it in a way. But for us at the moment, it's a resource issue really to sit down and drill it down really. But I mean, this, like Brian said, event page, brochure download, sign-ups, webinar, this is all working. But then again, there are pages or many pages were not really looked at or even updated. It's scary sometimes, yeah.
Another thing that gave me cause to sit here and bang my head against my table this morning, I'm in the process of building my virtual booths for my fairs that are coming up. And a lot of the information was carried over from the fall virtual booths. So I just have to go through and check and make sure that things are up to date. And a lot of it contains links that are built for the booth. And I'll click on the link and the page is gone. It's just gone. I don't know where it is. So this morning I was just sitting there trying to find certain pages to link up to the virtual booth, and it's changed just since last fall. And I don't always know where the changes happen or who executed them or where they went, but pages will just disappear.
Yeah. So look, again, so what you're referring to this is called broken links, and broken links counts as an error on Webmaster Tools, which again negatively impacts the SEO sort of score of pages in a website. And look, the whole point about this is information sharing. It's not selling, but if you want to speak with your account manager at Mintsist, an SEO audit picks up pages that should be deleted and broken links. And actually, it's not a scarily large project because you can automate so much of it. You know, like I say, ideally it would be done when a website's refreshed or redesigned or redeveloped, because it's kind of part of the same project. Because you would probably want to rationalize what we've been talking about, like the structure and the workflow and all of that kind of stuff at the same time. But it can be standalone. Hannah, you don't have the issue of having a massive website because yours is relatively new, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I was thinking actually while you guys were talking about the challenges that we faced, and I think if I'm honest, I'm about to start with the challenges. I think I've got that ahead of me. But one of the challenges we have got is that the website we've got live for Kinto Join is it's rebranded from a previous website. So as much as it is new, actually there are some inconsistencies and some errors with that website that we've kind of just migrated over. So there was a big process before we went live to go through that and make sure that it was still relevant content. And actually we're still finding that the wrong brand is being displayed in certain areas. But generally speaking, touch wood, I'm not going to have any of the real big challenges because it is a new website and it's relatively small, to be honest. There aren't that many pages on it. And I think because it's B2B as well, it's got relatively simple CTAs and they're all pointing to the same one. So fingers crossed, but I fear that I've got some challenges ahead of me.
Yeah, you've got challenges, but at least you don't have the ones that, you know, Brian and Mark have been talking about. Right, Rosie, should we come to you?
Yeah, so I've not been through a website redevelopment whilst I'm at Film. I think maybe Danny had, because he'd been there for longer. But we are going to be redoing our website coming up. Now we're going to start it in summer, like the planning phase. And I think for us, the key thing is about the flow of the website, and we want prospective students or parents to be able to find key information easily. So like prices, date, in just as little clicks as possible. And I think for us, where we are generating so much content, it's about the loading time of pages to kind of, as part of that user journey, to make it seamless for them to use, and that it's not a chore, that they're not sitting there loading pages. So I think those are two key areas that we're kind of considering.
Yeah, thanks. That's a really good point, because obviously Met Film is a film school, so there's quite a lot of video in there. The way that, which can affect load speeds. Obviously, if you embed it in a streaming server, it should mitigate that a little bit. But load speed, again, we've mentioned a few SEO drivers. Load speed is a big one for the Google search engine as well. So you're right to to be thinking about that. Okay, Flavio and Stefania, would you like to add anything? I know.
No, not really. I mean, I never looked at the website hours. I told you it's there. I mean, it's followed in Italy, and we do have another website actually, which is the enit.it, which is more for trade and more for the B2B, which that needs a good a good cleaning up, and which is really no, I can't find myself there myself, and which is ours. It's really horrible. But the Italian, the B2C, it's not that bad.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. Right. So let's get into this last little section. There we go. So we're going to talk now about conversion rates, how to measure this stuff. Oh, I beg your pardon. Sorry, I'm going to talk very briefly about mobile, and then we'll finish off with the conversion rate. So, so for completeness here, so when we talk about responsive design, I'm going to just make the assumption that we might be familiar with that, but most of us aren't. What that actually means is, if we've got a website that's and relative, most new websites should be designed in a responsive way. It means that it responds to the size of the device that it's being rendered on. And what that means, remember when we spoke about the presentation layer at the top, it means that essentially there's two different versions of the HTML rendering of a page, and one version is written for a mobile device, and one version is written for a laptop or a desktop device. Potentially, you can have three different versions, and the websites have really large amounts of traffic, like BBC. The newspaper websites will probably have a mobile version as well. And actually, you can have as many as you want, but typically it will be up maximum of three. Most commercial websites will definitely have a mobile version and a laptop or a full screen version. And what happens here is that when as you and you can even do it, you can go on the internet yourself and do this if you want. If you take your browser screen and you drag it down, you make it thinner, what you'll see is elements of a website that's responsive, which is most of them, will kind of disappear and they'll reorganize themselves. And the menu, for example, will disappear and turn into this 3-line setup that we're all very used to on a mobile device. And the reason it's doing that is so that it can keep the key bits of information in at a reasonable size, given that we're working on a mobile device on a much smaller screen. And so in this case, this is the responsive version of Salesforce.com, which is a big piece of software. And the larger I should have a graphic of the larger version of the screen, but if you want, you can look for yourself. You'll see it has a lot more information, left and right columns. And as you squeeze in, the left and right columns drop down and they go down to the bottom. So you'd have to scroll down to them. You just got the key information at the top. In this case, it's free trial of the software, watch some demos or call them. And the newspaper websites will work in the same way. They will have left and right information, and when you view it on a mobile, or if you're viewing it on your laptop and you literally squeeze your browser in, it will still respond to the width of the browser. So it's not so much the device, it's the width of the browser in which they're being rendered. So that's called responsive design, and it's exactly the same as the website. It's the same piece of software as the website. It's just responding to the device that it's being watched or viewed on, or interfaced on. This is also a responsive, this is also a responsive website. But the reason I wanted to show this picture is in the ASOS's responsive website, and in most e-commerce responsive websites that have a mobile app from which you can purchase, they will have this drop down at the bottom that says view in the app, or get the app from the from the relevant app store. If you're on a Google phone, if you're on a phone that runs Android, which is a Google operating system, then it will be the Google App Store. If you're on an iPhone, then it will be the Apple Store. And so they still have a responsive. To the point I want to make is that ASOS, obviously very big clothing, online clothing retailer, they still have a responsive website, and you can still buy on that responsive website, and you can do everything you want. But the reason why they use up real estate to try and get people to download the app or view in the app is that if the app users of ASOS.com will per year will spend 2 or 3 times as much money as the non-app users of ASOS.com. And the reason for that is it's just ease of use. If it's on my phone, the app is more functional. It's going to remember who I am. It's going to remember where I am if I haven't completely closed it down. It's going to remember my preferences. If you've got an app, then you can run push notifications. So let's instead of me let's talk now about the differences between a traditional app that's obviously loaded onto my phone and a mobile responsive website which is viewed through a browser on a phone. So as we mentioned, the responsive websites, they're platform independent, meaning it doesn't matter if you watch it on an iPhone or any phone that's running on Android, or even a Nokia phone that might run on Microsoft software. It doesn't matter. You don't have to change it because it's essentially the same as a website. All it needs is a browser. If you're going to write an app, you typically, most people are writing one that's compatible with Android. So any platform that's running Android, Google's operating system, and one that's compatible with iPhones. And they're two different. The way that you program them is completely different. So it's projects. You could have a similar design phase, but the actual programming phase is completely different. The benefit of apps is this: you can take advantage as soon as you've got an app, because it's loaded onto the phone. You can take advantage of a much wider range of the features that are on that phone. So you can have access to the photos, the videos. You can have access to the geolocation capability of a phone, even the orientation of a phone. All of these inputs become available to an app once they're actually installed on your phone. You don't have the same access, or certainly not the same level of access to those features via a responsive website. The other thing that the other reason why a lot of brands want to be on an app is because it's that thing about consumers around the world today. What's the product that we value most, or the thing that we value other than hopefully our family and loved ones. What's the material possession that we value most in our lives? 20 years ago it might have been our cars. These days it tends to be our mobile phones. And so if we can be a brand on someone's phone, and I'm visible to that person, and that person's touching me, then that's a great sort of place for a brand to be. In terms of updates, you as you probably know, if you want to make an update to an app, you need the user to actually allow that update to happen. Whereas with a website, you can just change it and it's immediately changed. So that's mobiles. If anyone's got any question on mobile, we'll take it in the last little section. I just want to talk finally about website conversion rates, and then we'll drop into a final discussion. So we've been talking and touching around the subject of like, what's the objective of a website? So when we talk about how valuable is a website, or what's the conversion rate of a website, I'll talk you through a really simplistic example of kind of what we're saying. So let's imagine the simplest example really is a B2B. Well, actually, you can do it for B2C, B2B, but let's say it's a website that is all about generating inquiries of any kind. So, inquiries through a form, let's say, or email or telephone, if we can track them, that's what we want to do. And let's say this website has 10,000 visits per year. And out of that, because we've got analytics, we've got tag managers set up, we know that there's about 200 qualified leads that come through per year. So 200 as a percentage of 10,000, is 2%. So we can say that if we get X number of visitors to that website, 2% of them will convert into a sales inquiry. We might want to go a step further and say, we convert 1 in 4 of our inquiries. Some organizations do this, some don't. You can just measure your primary objective. But if you want to go a step further, you can say we convert 1 in 4, so that's 25% become real world sales. So if we convert 25% of our 200 leads, that's 50 sales. If we're fairly consistent with our sales price, and for this example, we'll say we are, each sale is £20,000, 50 times 20,000 equals £1 million. So we can say this hypothetical website is benchmarked at £1 million of new business per year that it generates, and that's that might generate more than that going forward, but let's leave it there. So when we come to run a website redesign project for this hypothetical website, yes, we want to make it look better, we want to make it work better, we want to rationalize the number of pages, and we want to remove broken links, and we want to minimize load time, and all of the other things that we want to do. But the reason we're doing those things, even the reason we're making it look nice, is if it's a marketing website, is probably to make an improvement on the performance of that website, and therefore the conversion rate. So hopefully, as what we've conveyed today is sort of given you enough confidence to know that these marginal changes, when we're talking about 10,000 visits, will have a marginal impact. And the numbers I'm giving you here, these are real numbers. These are real world, even very conservative numbers. Conversion rates can be higher than this. But let's assume that we run that website refresh project, and after a period of time, we see that actually the conversion rate's gone from 2% to 3%. So this means if we run it for the next year, and assuming we get the same number of visits to the website, and in the following weeks we're talking about how to get more visits to the website. But step one here is get more from what we've already got. So 10,000 visits, we go from 2% to 3%, which means instead of 50, 75 is 3% of 10,000, which means we've got, sorry, I beg your pardon, 300 is 3% of 10,000. And if we're converting at the same rate in terms of our sales team, then that means 75 sales. If we're selling at the same value, that means 1.5 million pounds instead of 1 million pounds. So I guess the key message here is a marginal increase in conversion rates can have a significant, should and will, if you do it, have a significant impact in the actual value that website is generating. Okay, so a last little slide before we drop into a conversation, just to talk about some of the trends that are kicking off in terms of website design. And the ones I'm focusing on here, there are loads of design trends. So there's something called parallax scrolling, and obviously a lot more video. But these are the trends that I think are functional trends. That design has an impact on conversion rate, but these things I think going forward will have a pretty big impact on conversion rate and even strategy and things like that. So the first one of them is the rise of voice integration. Obviously, globally, we're pretty close to 5G, and we're definitely going to have an explosion of the Internet of Things. So this means lots of other things connected to the internet, and it's pretty sort of reasonably widely accepted now by the tech, by the people who build these sorts of technologies, that voice integration is going to play a really, really important part. I mean, if you think about your heating controls, there's no kind of you don't have a type screen sort of thing. At the moment, we're doing it through our phones. Going forward, the voice integration in the way that we're speaking to our smart speakers is going to become even more widely used than it is presently. And then, so what does that mean what does that mean for websites? Why am I talking about that for websites? Well, if you look at this top section here, when we speak into a search engine, we speak in a different way to how we would type. So the search that goes pubs near me would look more like, where is the closest pub to me right now? Bars in Richmond, show me the nearest bar to my office. It becomes much more context specific. The way people speak, is into voice initiated search, is materially different from text-based searches. And this is proven. This is already proven. It's just a question of it playing out as more and more people start to use voice search. So the other thing that's sort of loosely connected to this is kind of chatbots, but chatbots driven by AI. Chatbots have been inside websites for a while now. Historically, they were sort of manually operated, and if someone wasn't there, you could leave a message and things like that. But increasingly, chatbots are driven by AI, and by AI we mean that a chatbot can take a question, and using artificial intelligence and access to a database that it has behind it, it can start to serve out intelligent answers that might be coming from sources like FAQs, for example. And so we're already seeing it. The technology is already there. Chatbots driven by AI, will likely become increasingly visible on websites going forward. And by the way, the sort of voice activated AI also potentially comes into play here. And then dynamic content. So a lot of e-commerce websites already do this. So you bought this, you might like this. But then there's dynamic content in a broader sense. There's technologies that are becoming available where a user who reads a certain blog article can have personalized content fed to them in the blog feeding section of a website. And dynamic content is definitely going to be an interesting area to watch. Okay, so the final question, that starter question I've got up is, what do you think users might want to see from your websites, going forward? Okay, who should we start with? Does anyone want to go? Okay, Alice. Thanks, Alice.
I would say dynamic content. And also, like, I think dynamic means also when I'm looking for a specific program, so that the website would give me the program I'm looking for, or something like, it's like AI in a way, Elliot. I don't know. In my previous organization, we did, they did the whole thing and created a dynamic website based on the user's interest. So I don't know how it works exactly in the back end, but this is, I think, the way forward, to present information the user is interested in only. Otherwise, again, they might get lost again, or it's too much information on the wrong place, which the user is not interested in. Yeah. Yeah.
So if you think about, obviously social media networks, social media sites, the way they work, the feed is sort of personalized, and that's, we're logged in, they've got loads of index points on us. But some of the content management systems, will enable personalization to the level of, if a user's if a logged in user has read a certain type of blog article, via cookies, you can identify that user and then serve them up similar content.
Yeah.
So that's probably what you're talking about, and that it's still cookie technology, but although those types of websites won't be able to identify, unless they're logged in, they shouldn't know exactly who the person is, but they can track the device and therefore serve them up similar content. Brian, anything to add to that?
No, I don't think so. Dynamic content is something that I agree with. I don't know how this relates, or if there were certain retail websites that I go to that remember me when I go back to the website. and pull up things that I've looked at before. I don't know how that's categorized or how that would play in, but I feel like some of the retail sites are pretty savvy in remembering my preferences, what I've looked at or what I've purchased, and those recommendations like you just showed on the previous slide. And I wonder perhaps if we could somehow integrate that into the education world in our website and remember where students went, what pages they visited, or maybe speak to them by name. I don't know.
The B2C, like retail websites, the big e-commerce websites, obviously they're heavily invested in personalization because it's a massive driver for their sales. So, I mean, I said a minute ago that they won't necessarily know who they are, but that's actually not strictly true. There are some platforms where if you log into them once, even if you're logged out, via cookies, they might be able to track you back, you know, to an actual person. But you would have had to set up an account with them at some stage, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think generally if it's like if I purchase something, so I enter my name, my address to have something shipped. When I go back, they'll remember me and tailor things to me and call me by name. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, that's right. So in terms of building it in terms of building the capability, and that technology is sitting in the back end, so-called back end, meaning the database layer and the application layer. So it's not something that you can kind of easily build in. Having said that, the sorts of plugins that are available in some content management systems are giving the sorts of capability that I think Alice was referring to, where it's like using cookies, you can kind of serve up something different based on the fact that we recognize the cookie, you know, if that makes sense. But yeah, look, it's an interesting area, and it's still developing. But you know, we're seeing it in shopping sites at the moment. We're likely to be seeing it in other sectors, industry sectors going forward. Rosie,
hiya. Yeah.
What are your guys?
So I kind of mentioned about the flow of our website, user journey, and that sort of stuff. But one thing that you mentioned, we are exploring UniBuddy, which is a chat function, which we're going to integrate with our website so that prospective students can talk to student ambassadors from our courses. Because I think for us, a lot of our interest is generated through word of mouth, but it's also that students want to hear that student voice. So I know that the team have been looking into this for quite a while before I even joined, but it's something that they're going to be exploring over the next couple of months.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea, particularly for the sorts of audience that you're serving. You know, young people going into higher education. And the fact that you're using ambassadors as well is a really nice way of doing it. So that's students who are already in your university.
So they're going to be like coached and sort of like trained up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's like Richmond. No, I mean for using universities using ambassadors, they've been doing it for a very long time, decades. So I remember meeting ambassadors when I went to university 100 years ago. But obviously what you're doing now is taking that experience and putting it online, particularly
because of the pandemic as well. Those student ambassadors would normally be in person at open events, but it's like we've got to adapt to, one, the changing market, and two, the current climate that we're in. And it's also a lot easier for students to just have that chat function on their phone or whatnot. So it's just adapting to what suits our audience, really.
Yeah. And in terms of voice originated searches, is that something that ever comes up in conversation with you guys?
No, it's not.
Because we've been sort of tracking the rise in, excuse me, because you can see if you dig into the analytics in the right way, you can see that sorts of if you dig into tools, industry benchmark tools, you can see the sorts of searches that are coming via that are originated via voice. And look, this is relevant for Alice and Brian and Rosie, but for the HE sector, I mean, most people my age are not regularly searching via voice, but an increasing number of students are, and you see the number of people searching for, undergraduate courses. London, for example, is increasing significantly year on year. And so that the implication is that those long tail searches, like the more descriptive searches that you get via voice originated search, will become more important. And the implication there is we want to start to use those terms in our hub content.
Right.
It's just something to keep on the radar for now. Mariana?
I was hoping you picked on Mark first this time. Yeah, I'm not too sure. I think I like the idea of what you said. You may also like customers, also bots. What Brian was saying as well, of remembering the pages they've visited before and seeing how that sort of starts falling into education. The chat function is something I quite like, but I don't think we're in a position to do. We won't be for a bit. And the voice search, I don't think we've come across that. I don't know why, because definitely the age of the target audience would be the right one, but it's not anything anyone's ever brought up before.
Yeah, look, just to be clear on those trends, I'm definitely not saying these are things you need to jump on now.
No, yeah.
No. I'm probably, definitely less relevant for ICMA.
I think so. But nevertheless, I think the suggestion of, you're on a course page and somehow you've ended up there without seeing the cluster, the topic page before, that's a good page to promote other courses. Arguably, and that's something that I think every now and then we've raised, and sometimes it happens, sometimes not so much, on the pages related to the pages the broader association has. They relate to topics that we have on our courses as well. So having those sort of suggestions at the bottom of that page is something that it's a constant conversation we're having. Sometimes we manage to get something across and sometimes not so much, but yeah.
Good, thank you, Mark. Anything to add to?
No, it's interesting. Actually, Mariana just kind of articulated what I was thinking about this last point in terms of dynamic content. Because of the vast bulk of the website is based around market stuff or regulatory stuff, but they're all still categorized in, we have the same categories in terms of the training we offer. So if someone works at a DCM desk in a bank, for example, and they visit the website to look at some aspect of the issuance process, they would be, in theory, the best people to apply for one of our courses in this topic, right? So it would be, as Mariana said, it'd be quite nice to have kind of a dynamic content function whereby anyone who visited a regulatory piece on the secondary market said, are you interested in taking these secondary market courses or something? And I think that's potentially something that ICMA could look at doing, in the future in terms of the technology you just mentioned. The rest of it, I thought it was quite interesting. Before ICMA, I was working at London Business School, and they were investing very heavily into digital infrastructure there and things like apps. And I think it's a really interesting concept when you have a university that is really you can have a lifestyle there. It's not simply the classes. There's so much extracurricular stuff and so much social stuff, and when you have an app that you really can drive a lot of traffic through that and create a really sustainable brand. For something like us, it's not as important. And I think the only other thing that I was thinking was in terms of the voice recognized. You're right. Marianne is right in that the age demographic of the people who take our courses tends to be certainly younger than myself, and people in the early stages of their career. And I think you're right. As people become more comfortable with things like Alexa and Siri, and they get more used to this. They become more comfortable with sharing information that 20 years ago we may have been slightly uncomfortable sharing, you know. And as you say, with the rise of the Internet of Things, as you know, you start to talk to your fridge and you start to talk to your washing machine and things like that, and it becomes normalized, that will have a huge influence. You know, whether it has an influence on, you know, the education department of ICMA in the next 10 years is another question, but I can see you can definitely see it coming.
Yeah. You made a couple of really relevant points. I'll just really quickly pick up. So that the concept of an app, making it sort of functional, and the example you used was a good one. It's like, how can you extend the experience of being a student of LBS, wasn't it? Yeah. And as opposed to, it's a replication of my marketing website, which obviously that's not really the way to think about apps. So that was a really good point. And well, look, all your points were good, but I think you're absolutely right in what you say. It's as it becomes normalized. I mean, I'm old enough to remember the advent of Facebook and social media sites in general. It's considered something for really young people, but young people start to use it first, yes, but as they use it, then the older generations adopt it, you know. And in the case of Facebook, you're talking about their main target demographic now is not young people, it's older people, and I guess it's going to play out in a similar way with voice search, you know, for the reasons that you've said. So thanks, Mark, that's brilliant. Should we come to Hannah quickly? On my screen there's two of you, but what I don't know if other people have seen that.
Yeah, sorry, my internet completely dropped out, so I've seen that as well, and I don't know how to shut the other one off. So right. At least it's near the end and we haven't got to deal with it for too long. I think there are a couple of things actually that I've picked up on that I think would be really useful for us. So one of them around dynamic content. So as it stands, I'm kind of looking after Kinto Join, which is one of our mobility services, but the long-term goal is to have a whole host of different mobility services, and actually we would be able to use the dynamic content to be able to say, actually, if you're interested in Kinto Join, then you may well also be interested in one of our other B2B products, and here's some more information about that. So I think that's a really good point and something that I hadn't considered before. So that was really interesting. And then the other one was around chatbots, and we did have a similar concept when we had the Faxi site that we haven't migrated over. But actually that's something that we're quite keen to pick back up, and it might be that it's just kind of an FAQs document that's feeding it, and we can update that continuously. But I think as a customer, when you land on the site, there are quite a lot of questions, and that's something that we need to address as part of our content creation. But I think for people that are considering more bespoke questions, that would actually be a really useful tool to have. And it might not be that one of the team is sitting behind it, but if we can automate some of that, then, you know, it's just another way of getting information, isn't it? Which can only be a benefit to that sales process and that potential lead.
Sorry, that's a really good point. Really good point, Hannah. Because if you are going to look at automated chatbots, the easiest way, and it's always good to start off small with this stuff, is an FAQ. Because if you've got, typically with FAQs, you've got, you know, if it's an e-commerce, it would be, you know, returns policy, you know, delivery process, you know, my account. So you have different groups, and then underneath them, you might have 10 frequently asked questions. So if you've got a tree structure FAQ like that, it's pretty easy to migrate that into a really dumb automated chatbot that can't really go wrong, because the user just picks the topic, they press on the topic, then they've got their FAQs, they press on the relevant one, then they've got their answer, and then they can go back home and start again if they want to. And that's a good way of in my view, of starting with automated chatbots, and then you can build on it from there. There was another point you made, but it's gone from my head now. What was your final point, Hannah?
I think the chatbots was the point. The other one was around the dynamic content and linking it with the other Kinto products.
Yeah. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Yeah, the dynamic content, definitely for you, because you've got these 5 divisions, haven't you? And they all loosely interlink, so that makes sense as well. Thank you. Okay, Stefani and Flavio, do you have anything to add?
Well, again, the website, well, the scenario is quite interesting because our website is anything but dynamic, and could be interesting actually to get some information and then send out information, I don't know, new openings, new events in Italy or something like that. Not, of course, the guys or those, I mean, it's not, they're not going to change the Colosseum, but new museums or new concerts. So that could be interesting actually. So to send out people notification or something. As far as the chat box, I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know, to be honest with you.
We don't have anymore an information office where people can contact us and ask us questions. So it could be centralized in this.
Yeah, exactly. See, they could gather all the information. When people don't even sign up on our website, so
yeah. It should be developed.
You're missing out a huge database, actually. I believe.
And so, also, maybe we recognize people by interest or by if they're in a particular region or particular activity like spa or active holidays. It definitely could improve in that way.
Yeah.
But maybe we can propose it to our colleagues.
That could be, So,
but we won't be doing it, but it's a good idea. I think it's
propose it to the minister. Go and
yeah, there you go.
Actually, what I wanted to say, Hannah, the final point for everyone is this: when you think about chatbots, remember Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, Instagram Manager, they can be set up as chatbots. And so as in you can plug in automation into them and take over manual conversations. So if you're anything to do with lead generation, definitely, Hannah, it is relevant for you, but also others here, Italy as well, all of us potentially. If you can get someone onto that messenger, remember how Messenger works, WhatsApp works. So it maintains state, meaning you're always going to have the connection with that customer, and where you go, you can pick up off the back of a conversation, even if that was initiated by a robot, if that makes sense. So that it is powerful. It's not easy to do, because there are administrative challenges and technical challenges, but it's probably something we're going to see more of. You guys, I've enjoyed this session so much, and thank you, massive thanks for being really engaged. I'm sincere apologies for overrunning for 10 minutes, so I'm sorry to keep you away from your dinners. I'm going to stay here if anyone wants to ask me a question, but otherwise, good night, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks so much.
Good night, Alex.
Cheers. Bye. Take care.